Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Metabolism and Menopause podcast. My name is Stephanie, and I am your host and CEO of Vitality OET. We are a women's nutrition, health, and fitness company that focuses predominantly on women's hormones, particularly as they start going through perimenopause and onwards. We know that you start experiencing so many changes in this time of your life, whether it be hot flashes, night sweats, irritability, brain fog, or that waking around the middle that seems to have come out of absolutely nowhere despite you not changing anything. So you go back to those tried and true methods of cutting calories, cutting carbs, doing a bunch of cardio, yet nothing seems to be working. You're putting in all this effort, you're not getting results, and in fact, the scale might actually start moving in the opposite direction than what you want it to. But we know now that your body is inherently different than what it was prior to you experiencing these hormonal changes. So our mission here at Vitality is to help you really understand what happens to your body in this time of your life, so you can reach those health and fitness goals, live a life full of vitality, be able to feel in control and at home in your body again, and really understand how to take care of this new body of yours. So today we are talking about one of my favorite topics. And if there's one thing that I could put on a billboard anywhere for the whole world to see, especially women during perimenopause and menopause, it would say, eat your freaking carbs. That's what it would say in big letters, bold. I would have it written out in the sky. It is something that is like demonized so much, but let's face it, nobody got fat from, eating a bunch of blueberries or oats or even potatoes for that matter. It's really, really crucial to really understand that carbs play a huge role in very important processes like building muscle mass, improving your thyroid function, keeping your metabolism up nice and high so you can have easier fat loss. And it seems like everywhere you look and everyone you talk to, people think that carbs are going to destroy your blood sugars, that they are going to make you fat. First and foremost, we need to spread the word that carbs as a group, as a whole, are not responsible for all the world's diseases, for blood sugar or weight issues. Otherwise, everyone would feel amazing on keto and it would work, and that'd be the thing that everyone would be doing. But it doesn't. So therefore, it is not the answer. It is not that simple. In fact, eating a low-carb diet can actually be incredibly detrimental to our health, especially once we start going through this wonderful journey of perimenopause and the years that follow, where our estrogen levels start to drop. So today I'm going to explain so much, and it's going to probably shock a lot of you if you haven't listened to this podcast for a very long time, if you haven't been part of our Facebook community, which has over 19,000 women in there. So please join there. We have so much free information and guides and stuff in there. So if you aren't a part of that, this is going to be very new, very shocking information. And I really want you to come into this with an open mind, throw away everything that you thought you knew about carbs, all the things that it's going to cause negatively, and really try and listen to what I'm saying here. And this doesn't mean that you go from eating zero carbs to a whole bunch of carbs, so that's going to have its own issues, which I'm going to talk about later. But I just want to frame this as let go of everything you've ever thought you knew about carbs. Carbohydrates, unfortunately, when we're thinking about past dieting history and, all the other fad diets our parents used to do and our grandparents used to do and our friends used to do, really demonized carbs. And we have to realize that these narratives that we're told over and over and over again, we almost take it as fact, when in reality, that's not the case. And everything's very individualized. And back then, no one gave a crap about menopause. Let's be honest. There is just new research and people actually starting to give a crap in the last 5 years. It's crazy the lack of studies that are out there. And that stuff takes time. They need to replicate them multiple times before they can go into books and before they can make it into medicine and into courses, right? This stuff, there's such a delay from what we're seeing. It takes up to 20 years. So again, be open-minded here. So first, let's talk about estrogen, because if we're going to be talking about carbs and perimenopause, we know estrogen is going to go down, right? This is something that is going to happen. And this is if you are going through surgical menopause as well, or you've had breast cancer and you can't take HRT, right? Your estrogen levels kind of just stop overnight from chemotherapy and the medications you're on and things like that. You really need to understand what happens to your body estrogen wise and the things that you need to combat, because you're not going to see an increase in estrogen because of the medications that you're on, right? Or surgical menopause, you go from having estrogen to overnight not, right? So you need to understand what happens when estrogen goes down, which I'll do a whole other podcast on. But I'm going to touch on a lot of things here today and how carbohydrates can really help you combat the negative effects from low estrogen levels. So when estrogen drops, one of the first things I like to talk about is that we have a very hard time accessing energy stores, because that's something that estrogen does. Which is why working out fasted is such a terrible idea, because our body cannot access energy stores as easily. So we're going to see our stress hormones go up. We're not going to have as much energy during the workouts. We're not going to be able to push as hard. We're not going to get as much, and we're going to get less results from the workout that we're doing. Isn't that crazy how like you're working so hard in the gym and you're working out fasted, but if you would have had just like something to eat beforehand, you could be getting better results. Isn't that wild? And we need to have that readily available fuel in our body. It's really important. And carbohydrates, glucose, that's our body's preferred fuel source. It's what it wants to use because that is what it's there for. And so not to mention that your cortisol response is going to be worse. Like exercise increases your stress response, but that's going to be exaggerated when estrogen goes down. And if we're not having carbohydrates before we work out, that response is going to be even higher. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about cortisol later, but I talked about it on a podcast a couple episodes back that you can listen to about how, like, why this is so important, especially in perimenopause. And women, from recent studies, actually burn more calories during exercise when they are in a fed state. Yes, everyone thinks, sorry, I gotta turn my heater off. It's getting too hot in here. As I'm like leaning sideways. Yes, everyone thinks that if you work out fast, you're gonna burn more fat. That's not true. Just not true. Women will actually burn more calories during exercise if they are fed beforehand. So having carbs before you exercise and to help you with your workouts, very, very, very important. Okay. This doesn't mean you're having a donut before you work out, right? This is like, if you're an early morning exerciser, for example, you can probably stomach half a banana. You can probably stomach a handful of grapes. You can have a rice cake with a little bit of nut butter on it. Like, it doesn't have to be anything huge. People think, I don't have time. I'm going to feel sick if I don't have that. Or you could even try having some juice. We have women that we work with that their stomach just doesn't love it. We give them some juice before they work out, and their results have been amazing, and they feel so much better during the workouts. Their results are better. It's a win-win all the way around. So the next thing that we have to think about with estrogen dropping is that we become something called more catabolic. So what this means is our body is more in a breakdown mode when we're looking at muscle mass. So our body wants to break down muscle mass for energy. When we eat low carb, our body also wants to break down muscle mass for energy. We become more catabolic. And we also see this in the absence of food. So if we're not eating enough food, or if we're doing a bunch of fasting, your body also breaks down muscle mass for energy. And so what ends up happening is, because we're not getting enough carbohydrates, or we're not getting enough calories in, or we're not eating often enough, our body breaks down not only the muscle tissue from like our biceps, things like that, but also from our gut lining, which leads to more inflammation, which leads to food sensitivities and bloating and a ton of other problems. And we don't want that. Okay. And what happens is, when our body breaks down that muscle from the gut lining and from the muscles from like exercise, for example, our body breaks down that muscle and it takes it to our liver. And then our liver turns that into sugar and puts it into our bloodstream, because our body needs energy to do the activity, or, to just live life. So if you're not having breakfast in the morning, this also happens, right? And we know this is already a concern during perimenopause and menopause when estrogen goes down. So what ends up happening is, because we're low carb, because we're low calorie, because we are in a high stress state, our body is constantly breaking down muscle mass, giving it to the liver to turn into sugar. So then sugar goes into the bloodstream to provide us for energy. So blood sugar goes up without carbohydrates by our body breaking down our muscle. Then what happens is insulin comes in and it tries to take the sugars to the cells where it needs to be used, right? So that's its job. But then our sugar starts to drop down again. And if we're not eating, we're not having carbohydrates regularly throughout the day, if we're skipping them at lunchtime and only having that salad with protein, this happens. So then our body breaks down more muscle and takes it to the liver again and turns it into sugar and puts it into our bloodstream. And then insulin comes back up. And if this cycle keeps going because we're eating low calorie too often, because we're not having enough carbs on a regular basis, we can actually end up insulin resistant. So you can actually become insulin resistant and have worse blood sugars because you're not eating enough food, because you're not having enough carbohydrates in your day, not because you're having too many carbohydrates. And there is a study that I have pinned on my Instagram in the highlights that shows you this. Okay. So the other thing that also breaks down muscle mass for energy is cardio. Cardio sends a signal to the body that, hey, we need to become better and more efficient at this cardio thing. And it's not just running. It's not just cycling. This is also the HIIT training. This is also your Orange Theories, your boot camps, your beach bodies, anything where you're doing exercises with lighter weights. So 10 pounds and less, right? Where we're doing like 12, 15 plus reps. We're not taking very much rest in between. It might be 30 seconds, maybe 45 if we're lucky. That's cardio. That's not strength training. That is cardio. And that is going to send the signal to our body that we have to be more efficient with our calories. Our body always wants to get better at whatever we're telling it to do. So it does that by getting rid of muscle mass because muscle burns a lot of calories at rest. So you can imagine if we're doing this running thing, for example, or these boot camps, our body's like, man, this is taking a lot of energy. How can we conserve our energy? Because that's its priority. Because the signal that you're sending isn't one to build muscle. It's one to become more efficient with energy. So then your body's like, okay, how can we make sure the next time we do this, we only burn 100 calories, and then we only burn 90 calories, and we only burn 80 calories. And every time you do the exercise, your body's going to get better at burning less calories for that specific thing that you are doing, which means, okay, how is this happening? Our body breaks down muscle because muscle burns a lot of calories at rest, and it wants our body to be good at saving calories when we're doing a bunch of cardio. So when you lose muscle mass, you might lose some weight, but you don't feel any thinner, right? You don't feel fit and toned. And it's because you're losing muscle mass. So your body fat percentage is actually going up despite you maybe losing weight. That is not good. Okay. So, and then you're also pairing that with low calorie and low carb, and your estrogen levels are low. So you are sending like 4 times the signal to your body to break down muscle mass. And like not having enough carbohydrates is going to be one of the biggest things. Okay. So this, and the reason that this happens, the reason that our body breaks down muscle mass in all these different scenarios is because of cortisol. Okay. So cortisol plus not eating enough, so what happens is you're not eating enough carbs, you're not eating enough calories, you're doing a bunch of cardio, boot camp, HIIT style workouts. And then you are doing all this kind of exercise, right? We're going to see an increase in the loss of muscle mass because of the increase in the cortisol levels that we're seeing. And so what happens is when this muscle mass keeps getting broken down, you have a higher body fat percentage, but also you have less muscle to burn calories at rest. So your metabolism, how many calories your body burns, gets lower. So your body sucks at burning calories, making weight loss even harder, which we know it's already hard when we're dealing with hormonal imbalances and you've done the yo-yo dieting and we've done all these other things. And then the very things that you're doing to try and improve your body composition are actually making it worse. Okay. You end up looking skinny fat, quote unquote, right? Where it's like you feel small, but like you don't have muscle tone. You don't feel like you look fit. And this is why you're busting your butt in the gym and doing quote unquote everything right and not getting results. Plus you feel like garbage. And this is because you're not eating enough food, but not eating enough carbs. This is so important. Carbs are considered muscle sparing. If you have carbohydrates in your system, your body will not break down muscle mass. And again, this isn't an excuse to have the donuts and the ice cream and the chocolate. I'm talking about have a potato with your lunch. Have some rice. These are all things that you can incorporate. Have a piece of whole grain bread. You can do that. Have some beans, have some pasta. It's okay. You don't have to be so afraid of these things. They are going to help you get to where you want to be without carbohydrates. Good freaking luck building muscle. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And this is where you see like CrossFitters, for example, if they start cutting out their carbs, performance goes down, they lose muscle mass, they feel like garbage because your body doesn't have enough fuel and you start losing muscle mass. So then of course your performance is going to get worse. You need carbs. So that's muscle mass. So far we've covered you need carbs to help you with energy, like be able to access energy stores. We don't have a easy time being able to access that when our estrogen goes down. And then being able to build and maintain muscle mass. We need carbohydrates for that. The next one is carbs are crucial for thyroid health. We are at an increased risk of developing hypothyroidism when we enter perimenopause. Women get hypothyroidism 80% more than men. And studies show that women who eat low-carb diets have significantly reduced thyroid function. So you're increasing your risk even more by cutting carbohydrates. So if you have hypothyroidism and you've been to someone who understands this stuff, you're put on a pretty high carb diet. You're going to see beans, you're going to see potatoes, you're going to see rice, you're going to see oats, you're going to see fruit. You have a pretty carb heavy diet. And this is because eating more carbohydrates helps your thyroid function. And this is because when we don't have enough carbohydrates, cortisol goes up, our stress response. And when cortisol goes up, our body cannot send the signal to our thyroid to produce thyroid hormone. So what happens is we see a decrease in your TSH levels. And this is where people might start trying to put you on medications and stuff. And it's have you tried just adding carbs? Can we solve the problem, which is lowering your cortisol levels by introducing carbohydrates and adjusting your exercise, stress management, that kind of stuff, but increasing your carbs and making sure you're eating enough food to lower that cortisol level so that your thyroid function can be where we want it to be. And this is important because the thyroid is the thermostat that controls how the internal systems determine if your body's good or bad at burning calories. Lower thyroid function means your body's metabolism has slowed. Your body is not good at burning calories. When your thyroid function is higher, your body's very good at burning calories. So we don't want our thyroid function to get lower. So by cutting carbs, you are making your body worse at burning calories, which is not what we want. And when you have hypothyroidism, it does make it harder to lose weight. It's possible. A lot of our clients have it. It just takes a longer time because we've already kind of surpassed a certain point, and now we have to work a lot harder to try and get that metabolism back up. Okay. Next one is carbs are crucial for hormone health, particularly progesterone production. Progesterone is a wonderful hormone. It is the hormone that makes you feel calm and relaxed, and you don't have anxiety. And it also decreases your bloating, and it also decreases your fluid retention. And adequate progesterone, so having enough progesterone in our body, helps our thyroid function properly. So if we have low progesterone, chances are we're going to see our thyroid function start to lower. And yes, progesterone does start to slow down production during perimenopause and menopause. This is normal. It's supposed to happen. But what we see is that we have this high stress response. Cortisol goes up because we're not eating enough carbs, not eating enough calories. And then we see progesterone tank because if cortisol is high, progesterone cannot be produced. So progesterone cannot be produced. And also the signal to send to our thyroid to produce thyroid hormone is also reduced. And we're also going to see that when progesterone goes down, our androgens start to go up, our more male type hormones. And that leads to things like PCOS type symptoms. Both of those things can lead to more belly fat around the belly area, more blood sugar control issues, a slower metabolism. So our body starts sucking at burning calories, and we start feeling really poorly, like our energy is not good, that kind of stuff. And the awesome part is we can improve this by eating enough calories and eating enough carbohydrates. Very important because that lowers cortisol. The other thing with carbohydrates is it helps with your sleep. Yes. So as long as cortisol or stress hormone is high, melatonin cannot be produced. So if we eat carbohydrates before bed, it brings down our cortisol levels. It increases our melatonin levels naturally, allowing us to fall asleep a lot easier. And we want to make sure that we're having like a slow digesting carb before bed for a bedtime snack. Usually about like 60 minutes, 45 minutes before bed, maybe 150 to 250 calories. Doesn't have to be very big. That way it doesn't affect your digestion at nighttime. But we want to make sure there's a decent amount of fiber in there and then some protein or carb in there, or protein and fat in there. So the reason for this is it slows down the digestion of that carbohydrate out of your body, which means you're not having blood sugar spikes and drops, which means then your cortisol won't come up and down. Okay, so if your cortisol comes up because your blood sugar drops at nighttime, you're going to wake up typically around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., somewhere around there. So having that bedtime snack can be so helpful. We do it with all the women in our program. Some of my favorites are popcorn with a pepperoni stick. Why was that so hard to say? Oatmeal, and you can add like the Fairlife milk or any other kind of protein powder or protein drink to it. Doing yogurt with some protein powder or some protein granola. Avoid fruit before bed because it digests a bit too quickly and can mess up the blood sugars. You can do toast with peanut butter or toast with an egg. Yes, just make sure it's a piece of whole grain toast. Has a little bit more fiber in it. And yes, it doesn't have to be an $8 loaf of bread. I buy one from my local grocery store. I'm Canadian, so I get it at Save On Foods, or I can get it at, I want to say Safeway maybe. I don't know. Anyways, it's one that has like flax and quinoa in it. And there's like 5 grams of fiber per slice of bread, which is awesome. And it's got lots of grains in it. It's great. So I'll have that with some peanut butter or an egg on top. And that's what I'll have for a bedtime snack. You could do like meat, cheese, and crackers. You can make protein balls, those protein bites. So like with oats, some nut butter, stuff like that. And just have one of those. It doesn't have to be huge. It's not going to like crazy affect your digestion before bed. You shouldn't be having a crazy huge meal before bed, right? But this helps with your sleep. Like think about Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner. You sleep so good. Everyone's like, oh, it's just a turkey. No, it's the potatoes and the bread and the macaroni and the pasta salad and all the carbohydrates that you have that help you sleep so good at night. That's what does it. And we know that if we're not getting good enough sleep, then our cortisol levels are going to be high. We're going to, the next day, which is going to lead to crashes and cravings and a hard time resisting the donuts at the office. It negatively impacts your hormones and your blood sugar control and all those kinds of things. So if you're someone who struggles with sleep, introduce more carbohydrates into your diet, have that bedtime snack. It's going to make a huge difference. Carbs are also how we get fiber, which has a ton of benefits. And I do want to pause here and say, if you are buying lots of quote unquote health products, for those of you who say you don't eat processed foods, that stuff is super processed and they add a bunch of stuff to it, right? Lots of additives and things like that. Those things, if you look at like the keto style flatbreads, for example, those usually have an insurmountable amount of fiber. That's not natural because fiber comes from carbohydrates. So it's like man-made, manufactured, and that can cause a lot of digestion issues for a lot of people, especially if you're eating typically a lower fiber diet and you start having those things. It can lead to a lot of issues. I had a woman that I was coaching that was eating like 35, 40 grams of fiber. We brought her back down to around 20 and her bloating and stuff is so much better and she feels so great. And we just had to cut out some of those quote unquote health products and now she's feeling so much better. But I digress. Fiber has a ton of benefits. So one of them is cholesterol reduction. Research shows that those that eat a diet in higher fiber foods that are natural, right, whole foods, can significantly lower your risk of heart disease and obviously cholesterol levels. Your blood cholesterol levels is something we see in clients all the time where we see improved markers in blood work, which is amazing. We have improved blood sugar control. Fiber can help slow down the breakdown and absorption of carbohydrates and sugars in your gut. And this can help treat or prevent insulin-related conditions such as diabetes. When blood sugar control is poor, we do tend to favor fat storage. And we don't want to favor fat storage. We want to favor fat burning. So we also have to note that with the higher fiber, it keeps us full longer because it empties our stomach so much slower. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to eat carbs without seeing blood sugar spikes, because I know a lot of people are concerned about that at the end, which is going to touch a little bit on this point here. We also see with more fiber, you have better digestion, right? It functions better. Regular bowel movements, and it can reduce your risk of developing some pretty nasty intestinal problems like diverticulitis and IBS. Important to note that stress is also associated with those things, so we got to keep those in check. Having enough carbs will help with that. And then actually skin health as well. So fiber can help in removing yeasts and different funguses out of the body, which can help prevent or reduce the instances of acne, rashes, eczema, which is great. That's like when we feel like when our skin looks good, we feel good, right? And that's an indication that things are functioning well in your body as well. Carbs are also incredibly important for lowering those cortisol levels, which I've already touched on. And I know I did a whole podcast on cortisol in particular, like 4 episodes ago, I think now. But it's a huge issue in perimenopause. This is like the number one thing that we combat with women is to regulate their cortisol curve, to regulate their cortisol levels so they don't have too much, they don't have too little, it's not accumulating in their body, we're getting rid of it enough. And we know that when cortisol is high, it can lead to so many issues. One of the main ones is weight loss resistance, a struggle to lose weight. Thyroid issues. We see women becoming hypothyroidism from doing keto for too long. A stop in your progesterone production, which can lead in really sudden excessive weight gain and fluid retention, plus tons of anxiety. It can negatively affect our estrogen levels as well. It can decrease our sleep quality. It can reduce our muscle mass. It can lead to adrenal dysfunction, just to name off a few of the things that can happen from cortisol being too high when our carbohydrates are too low. And cortisol is going to dump sugar into your bloodstream. So carbs are actually going to help with blood sugar control in the long run because we're not seeing our body break down muscle, take it to the liver, dump sugar into your bloodstream, insulin coming up, and this cycle just going. Carbohydrates will actually help stop that, which is good. You have more control over it. And the more stressed out that you are, the more carbohydrates that you need. The less sleep that you have and the lower the energy you have, the more carbohydrates you need. You should have starchy carbs at every single meal. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There should be carbs every time. Okay? So some of the questions that I get with people are like, okay, but what are some good carb sources, right? What am I allowed to eat? First of all, you can eat whatever you want. You're an adult. Just take responsibility for your actions, right? That's the rule number one. But some great options that are great carb sources are oats, whole grains. So that can come in the form of pastas and breads. Believe it or not, you can do it. Fruit, veggies, beans, potatoes. White potatoes are actually better for blood sugar than sweet potatoes, believe it or not. Rice. I exclusively eat white rice because brown rice tastes like cardboard and it's disgusting. Quinoa. Like there are so many options of carbohydrates that you can have. The only bad food for you is one that is that you are allergic to, right? Or if we have things that are like, I don't even want to say bad because like you can have treats. It's just learning when to eat them so it doesn't affect your blood sugar as much. So we talked about why carbs are so important, which I think you should all agree now that makes sense. If we have enough carbohydrates in our body, things are going to function better. Our metabolism is going to go up. So like our body's good at burning calories, making weight loss a lot easier. We can put on muscle mass, which helps us look fit and toned. So how do we manage blood sugar then? Because everyone's concerned about, okay, but if I eat carbs, I already went to the doctor and my A1C is already high out of nowhere. And it's like, yeah, because of these hormonal changes and the stress that your body is under that you don't realize. You could handle it well before, but now when your estrogen levels go down, it doesn't take as much for your cortisol to come up. Before it'd be a 9 out of 10 before we saw cortisol come up. Now it's a 5 out of 10 because estrogen's not there to buffer it. So we can't be as extreme with our restrictions and cutting carbs and doing a bunch of exercise, and we got to prioritize our sleep, all these things. So eating carbs while managing blood sugar. I want you to think of the glycemic load of the whole meal. Because people are like, oh, Rice is going to raise your blood sugar. When's the last time you ate a bowl of rice by itself? Probably never, right? Maybe when you were a toddler and super picky. I don't know. But like, you have to think of the entire meal and how that affects your body and the blood sugars with it. So here are some tips for being able to have carbs without negatively affecting your blood sugar, and some other quick little tips as well. So number 1, avoiding water at meal times. This one is always funny because I actually had a friend that we went out for supper and he was like, Steph, you like hardly ever touch your water at your meals. Like you wait a while. I'm like, yeah. So avoiding fluids 15 minutes before and 15 minutes after, plus during your meal, as much as you can. And this is to do with blood sugar control. So what happens is if you're chugging a bunch of water because a diet told you to, because you're going to feel full longer, right? Yes, but also that's going to empty out the contents of your stomach a lot quicker, leading to a blood sugar spike and drop. And that also is going to lead to more cravings later. So that's the first reason that you don't want to have a bunch of fluid around your meal times, because it'll empty the contents of your stomach more quickly. But secondly, it dilutes your your blood pH, your stomach acid pH. So it messes up with how acidic or basic your stomach is. And then if our acidity is off, then certain digestive enzymes can't be activated because it needs to be at a certain number. And then we have a harder time breaking down food, which leads to more bloating after meals. If you've ever had like your tummy making loud gargling noises after a meal, it's typically because you had too much fluid before or during your meal. So easy thing, doesn't change your meal at all. Just avoiding water around your meal times can make a huge difference for your blood sugar. The next one is no naked carbs. So what this means is whenever you have a carbohydrate, you are pairing it with something else, whether that's a fat or a protein. So for example, if I'm going to have fruit is a great carb, but you probably shouldn't have it by itself. So maybe you're having it with a little bit of yogurt, maybe there's some nut butter, maybe you're having a cheese stick with it, I don't know. But you're not having carbs by itself because carbs digest quickly, leading to a blood sugar spike and drop. As soon as we pair it with a protein or a fat, we don't get as aggressive of a spike or a drop of your blood sugars. So always, always, always pair your carbs with something else. This includes your treats. So let's say I want to have 3 Oreos. This is what I want to have, like my sweet treat. I want Oreos. I think, what can I add to balance this out a little bit more so my blood sugar won't be as out of whack? So maybe I have like a mini cup of Greek yogurt before I have my cookies. It's as easy as that. How can I make this more balanced so it's not going to affect my blood sugars as much compared to if I just had this treat by itself? That's it. Super simple. You can still have the thing. It's crazy. The next one is order of food intake. So this is great for every single meal. Obviously, if you have a sandwich, you're not going to break apart your sandwich and eat the different things separately, right? Because that ruins the essence of the sandwich, right? But for example, let's say like we always want to eat at least part of our veggies and part of our protein first before dipping into our carbs, because that'll help slow down the emptying of our stomach so that we're not having as big of a blood sugar spike or drop. So let's say I really want pasta. Nothing wrong with pasta. Pasta is delicious, okay? But Steph, how can I have pasta without it like totally affecting my blood sugars? Well, have a starter salad first. Literally as easy as that. My heater was making weird noises, so I turned that off for you guys. It's as easy as that. Having just a small starter salad before having your pasta will drastically change your blood sugar for that meal. It's wild. So have a starter salad, eat a little bit of the protein first in your pasta, whether that's like eat a meatball first or a few bites of chicken or whatever that might be, and then start eating the pasta and everything else together. But that makes it super easy. Same with a sandwich. You want to have a sandwich? Okay, you're not going to break it apart, but can you eat like a few carrots and celery sticks first before having that sandwich? Yeah, probably, right? So just make sure that you're eating some veggie and protein first before dipping into everything else, and then you're good. Super simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. The order of your food will make a huge difference in your blood sugar, like drastically. So pay attention to that with your meals. Then we have fiber. The higher the fiber in the carb, the slower that it's going to digest and empty your stomach. So then you're not going to see that blood sugar spike and drop. So making sure you're paying attention to fiber is great. However, remember, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. So typically for women, we want to be anywhere between like 20 to 30 grams of fiber a day. Increase slowly, because if you go from like 10 grams of fiber a day to 25, you will not poop for 4 days, I promise you, and you will feel like garbage. You will feel bloated, you will feel constipated, you will be uncomfortable, and you will not be happy. And then you'll think carbs are the problem when they're not. So pay attention to that, okay? When to eat treats, like I mentioned. The best thing is pair it with something, right? Or eat it right after a meal, because you already have all the fruit and the veggies and the carbs and stuff in there, right? So that's going to empty your stomach slowly. If you have a piece of cake right after, that's not going to affect your blood sugars as much. Whereas if you wait a while and you have cake on an empty stomach, that's going to spike and drop your blood sugars quite quickly. So you want to avoid that wherever you can. Pair things together. And this is where people go wrong, and it affects their sleep a lot, is people will have their chips as a bedtime snack, their chocolate as a bedtime snack, right? And this ends up really affecting their sleep because they get a blood sugar spike and then a drop. Their cortisol comes up and they wake up in the middle of the night and they're tossing and turning and they can't fall asleep. And this is why. Whereas if you would have had it right after a meal instead, and you would have been satisfied that you had the thing, or have a bedtime snack, right, that has that slow digesting carb like I talked about, and incorporate a taste of somehow, maybe you have some chocolate chips on it, whatever it is, right? Just you want to make sure you don't overdo it, but have those treats not by themselves, pair them with something always, ideally like have it after a meal. That's the best time. Or like making sure you're walking after meals can help with your blood sugar too. So you don't get as big of a blood sugar spike and drop, because your body will utilize those sugars in your bloodstream more readily if you go for a walk for like 5-10 minutes after your meals as well. And then the next thing too, when we're looking at carbs and just in general, you want to be aiming for 80% whole foods. Okay. We know whole foods are going to digest more slowly. They're packed with micronutrients. They're not going to lead to as many blood sugar spikes and drops. But pay attention to your ingredient list, because this is where people are like, well, Steph, yogurt is processed. Okay. Yes. It absolutely is. But look at the ingredient list. You can probably understand what most of those things are. What are the ingredient lists on some of the other quote unquote health foods that you're having? I would rather have yogurt than like a keto wrap that has a bunch of chemicals that I don't know how to understand, how to read. I don't know what they are. I can't pronounce them. Right? So paying attention to that, like, yes, it's processed, but there's more whole food items in it compared to some other options that you think are quote unquote healthier. And who was I talking to? We were talking about like health food labels, and like if you name your food a health food, you can actually like have so much leeway in terms of like what's regulated, what you have to put on the labels and stuff like that. So there can be a lot of things that don't match up, which is also just something to be aware of, which is why I want to aim for 80% whole foods. Okay. The last thing I want to touch on is what to expect when increasing carbs. Because when I tell people they can have carbs, they get excited and they're like, they go from eating like maybe 40 grams of carbs a day to having carbs at breakfast and lunch and dinner and their snacks and their bedtime snacks. So they go from eating like, let's say 40 to 60 grams of carbs a day to 200 plus. The scale will go up. It's not fat, but the scale will go up. And let me tell you why. 1 gram of carb requires 3 to 4 grams of water to digest. So if you're adding like, let's say 100 extra carbs in a day, that's an extra 300 to 400 grams of water that your body's holding onto to help digest them, which is not a bad thing. But 30 to 40 grams of water is going to result in a jump in the scale, right? So that's something to be aware of. You might feel a little bit bloated at first because you're having more water in your digestive system as well. So you need to increase carbohydrates slowly. Slowly. We're not doing this overnight. Increase your carbs slowly. Tracking can be helpful here, especially if you're worried about that stuff. The other thing too is glycogen stores. So when we're eating carbohydrates, they get turned into glycogen. That's how they're stored in our body. And they're stored in muscle cells. And like you'll notice when you have more carbohydrates in your body, you'll feel like your muscles look a little bit more round, more plump. Like it's an awesome feeling. So with that, you'll also find more water retention with that too in the storage. So imagine that your muscle glycogen stores are like empty, right? There's not much in there because you're not giving yourself enough carbs. That's like having a gas tank that's like a quarter full. Then you fill it up, you have more carbs, those get stored, right? That comes with some water as well in our muscle cells. Don't know why I'm touching my shoulders, but I'm doing it. So anyone on YouTube, sorry for looking like a chicken. If you have your gas tank a quarter full and then you weigh it, and then you fill up the gas tank and then you weigh it, it's obviously going to be heavier. Does that mean you gained fat? No, that means you have more fuel in the tank. This is exactly what's happening to you. It is not fat mass. Carbohydrates will lead to more variability in the scale just because of the water changes in the digestion and the storage of carbs, which again, it's not stored as fat. It's stored as glycogen, which is good. We want that. That's energy that our body can actually use. The other thing too is watching fiber. So like I mentioned, if you jump up in fiber too quickly, you will get constipated. It's hard to digest, so your body needs time to slowly get used to increasing your fiber intake. So like for me, I had white chicken chili. I tell this story all the time, so I'll be super brief here. The scale went up 5 pounds in a day. It stayed elevated for 4 days. I didn't have a bowel movement for like 4 days. It was terrible. I went from eating 15 to 20 grams of fiber to 45 overnight. That was a mistake. I didn't like overcompensate. I didn't try to cut my calories. I just tried drinking more water to help try and move things around. Did a little bit more walking just to help get like my digestive system moving. But that will increase the scale too. So that's an important thing to pay attention to. And then the other things that you can expect from eating more carbs is better energy, fewer energy crashes, better sleep. Digestion will improve if you're consistent with this. A decrease in your hormonal symptoms. These are the things that our clients see within the first 6 weeks of working with us when we make sure they're eating enough food and eating enough carbs. It makes a huge, huge, huge difference. So that's the nitty gritty on carbs. So they are incredibly beneficial for a number of reasons in perimenopause and menopause once estrogen starts to go down. So better access to energy stores, so better energy, better results in the gym, it's muscle sparing, better for our thyroid health, so our metabolism goes up and we look more fit, helps with progesterone production, thyroid production, decreasing androgens, keeping our hormonal imbalance in check, which we know hormonal imbalances can be terrible for weight loss resistance, right? It improves your sleep. It's how we get fiber, which helps lower your cholesterol, improves your blood sugar control, your digestive health and skincare. It's going to help lower your cortisol levels, which will help your body function amazingly, improve your health, and then by proxy, your waistline. And the more stressed that you are, the more carbohydrates that you need, the less energy and less sleep that you have, the more carbohydrates that you need. You can have carbs from all kinds of sources. Ideally, you want to be from 80% whole foods. So we're talking about oats and whole grains like breads and pastas, fruits, veggies, beans, potatoes, rice, quinoa. And then ways to eat to make sure that we're not having a ton of blood sugar issues is avoiding water at mealtimes, not having naked carbs, paying attention to the order that you're eating your food in, increasing your fiber intake, making sure that you're pairing desserts and treats around meal times, and aiming for 80% whole foods. You can expect the scale to go up a little bit when you start increasing your carbohydrates for more water retention and storage of glycogen in your muscles, which is good. It's not fat mass, so don't worry about the scale as you start increasing. Watch that fiber intake, and you can expect to have better energy, better sleep, better digestion, better hormonal symptoms. And it's going to lead you closer to being able to go into a successful fat loss phase and finally get the results that you have been dying to see. I hope this was helpful. Please share this with all your carbophobic friends. This is super important. One of the biggest mistakes that we see in women, especially during perimenopause and menopause. If you need help figuring out, am I eating enough carbs? Like you have no idea, or you have no idea how many carbohydrates you're actually consuming, or the calories, if you're doing things right, if you have no idea if you're actually doing everything quote unquote right, or you feel like you are and you're not getting results, even more of a reason, book a consultation call. These are free. We offer one per person for free to help you figure out, like we calculate your calories for you. We assess your status, where you are, give you suggestions on what you can start incorporating, give you some guides that'll be helpful to move you in the right direction specific to where you currently are, give you some timelines to really set you up for success. We don't talk about coaching unless you ask about it. We don't have that many spots in our program left right now. We are getting pretty close to capacity, which is insane. But we want to give you as much information as we can to help you start improving your health and getting you to where you want to be. We don't care if you ever coach with us. That doesn't matter with us. We just want to help. So if you want to book a consultation call, that's in the show notes there. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.